Hi everybody. This is going to demonstrate a manual flight of the EMB-110P in IMC conditions. We'll be using VOR beacon navigation to do that. So there won't be any GPS situational awareness while flying and no autopilot. The flight will take off and land at Pulliam Airport, Kilo Foxtrot Lima Golf in Flagstaff, Arizona. We'll take off from runway 21 and follow the Flagstaff One departure by intercepting the 172-degree radial outbound from the Foxtrot Lima Golf VOR. We'll follow that while gaining altitude that needs to be at a minimum of 10,500 feet by our next waypoint, but my intention is going to be to reach 11,000 feet and hold that. We'll do that before intersecting the 61-degree radial from the Delta Romeo Kilo VOR at 16.7 DME from Foxtrot Lima Golf. And that'll bring us to the OATES transition waypoint. Once there, we're going to execute a procedure turn. We'll use a teardrop entry and then fly the reciprocal 352-degree radial inbound back to Foxtrot Lima Golf. So once we reach the Foxtrot Lima Golf VOR, we'll then turn outbound on the 53-degree radial from there. This will send us toward the CALGU initial approach fix that's part of the ILS Runway 21 approach. Then flying along that 53-degree radial, we'll intercept the 284-degree radial from the India November Whiskey VOR. We're going to head outbound on that one toward the ZAMAB Intermediate Fix, and then we'll descend to 10,500 feet. So at ZAMAB, we'll be turning toward the airport where our 284-degree India November Whiskey radial intercepts the India Foxtrot Lima Golf localizer at 214 degrees inbound. So from there, we descend to 10,200 feet to intercept the glide slope at Female for a final approach and then follow that into land. I do have waypoints for this route programmed into the Garmin, and I'll be using those for reference later to see how my IFR flying handled compared to the desired tracks. To get this reference without influencing my navigation while flying, I'll be turning my eyes away from the display for a second or two while toggling V on the keyboard, and that'll display the VR map for a second or so. So by doing that, I won't get to see what's actually been happening until replaying the video later after the flight. Okay, we're lined up on the runway now and ready for takeoff. I've set us up in zero visibility using the new Weather Preset Pro add-on for Xbox, and the Foxtrot Lima Golf VOR is dialed in for our primary nav, so it can handle essentially the first 2/3 of our flight. Then the Delta Romeo Kilo VOR has been set up in the secondary nav so that we can intercept it at the OATES waypoint. And then we've also got the India November Whiskey VOR waiting in standby on that secondary nav so that we can intercept that later. And the India Foxtrot Lima Golf localizer is on standby in the primary nav, so it's ready to take over when we hit our intermediate fix. Okay, bringing power up. And we're moving. Gear up. And we very quickly lose any visual reference outside. So we're in the thick of it now, and I'm moving to the instrument view.
Continue for south departure.
Flagstaff Tower Perez 607.
So on our climb here, I'm working to trim my pitch while bringing the prop down to 91%. When I first tried this without making the effort to trim, my vertical speed during climb and descent was all over the place. So any poor souls on board would probably be barfing constantly. But making that effort to trim the ascent makes a huge difference in stability and just overall workload. Now we'll start a bank to 146 degrees to intercept that 172 degree radial outbound. So we've hit 130 knots, so bringing those flaps up. Banking right into the 172 degree radial now. And like really double checking on my controls to make sure the flaps are up, because I've made that mistake on a couple previous flights and it really messed up my performance. Okay, we've reached our cruising altitude of 11,000 feet, and I'm pulling power back and then fussing with my trim again to make sure that that flight stays relatively level without too much input. We can see the Delta Romeo Kilo radial is steadily increasing toward our 61 degree intersection. And that's also getting nicely confirmed as our DME approaches 16.7 miles, which is where we need to be. Okay, this is the OATES transition, and we'll turn 30 degrees left to start our teardrop entry. So the second hand on the clock was at 20 seconds when we started the turn, but I've been finding I struggle to meet the inbound course when I start my 1 minute at that point. So I'm noting 35 seconds as my 1 minute start point as I straighten out for my turn. That turn into the teardrop entry was pretty sloppy. I'm leveled out now, but about 180 feet above my desired altitude. And turning the OBS dial to the reciprocal at 352 degrees for when we catch our inbound leg. Okay, 1 minute plus a few seconds, and turning right 180 degrees to intercept the Foxtrot Lima Golf inbound radial. So timing 1 minute when I straighten out for my entry into the procedure turn seems to work pretty good for intercepting when I turn back inbound. Which probably means I just need to tighten up my turns a lot better so that I can start that 1 minute as soon as I begin the turn into the procedure turn. But we'll see. More practice needed. Okay, we don't need that Delta Romeo Kilo intersection anymore, so I'll switch the secondary nav to India November Whiskey, so that's ready for a little bit later. I already have that secondary OBS turned to 284 degrees, so that's ready to go later. Moving my heading bug to 53 degrees to help me see, nudging that OBS needle in a couple more minutes. We're approaching Foxtrot Lima Golf now and twisting to 53 degrees to make our outbound course. When I didn't have the aircraft trimmed cleanly on previous attempts, any dial twisting led to major disruptions in vertical speed, and then that cascaded over into errors with my course that took loads of effort to keep correcting. Remember, anytime you see that VFR map pop up, I wasn't looking at it during the flight, just to keep the instrument navigation honest. The VOR needles are swinging fast, so we're almost over the beacon and turning the rest of the way over to 53 degrees outbound. Okay, looks like I didn't start the turn soon enough and we overshot our waypoint a little bit too much there. So just turning further to get back in alignment. Taking a quick look at the Copilot HSI to be sure I do have 284 degrees selected for our next turn. I'm going to drop first level of flaps now, and I'll do that while we still have a few straight and level miles to get stabilized from that before a couple of critical turns and then our descent. Whoa, balloon pretty bad there and didn't keep that under control as well as I should. Approaching 300 feet higher than I want to be, and I also need to rework elevator trim. And gear down. Okay, the India November Whiskey needle is creeping closer to 284 degrees. So switching to the Copilot view, and I'll coordinate the turn from here as I watch the CDI. So just bank around and try to line up with that. And descending toward 10,500 feet now also. Yeah, so that worked out better than our last turn. So we're going to keep the view from the Copilot side right now so I can better stay lined up on the HSI. But I do need to take a detour back over to the primary nav, and we'll switch that to our localizer approach. So that's switched over to India Foxtrot Lima Golf and twisting the OBS knob to 214 degrees. So we can intercept that in just a few miles here. Okay, so we should intercept the localizer at 35.7 DME from the India November Whiskey VOR, so I'll switch back to our primary nav and get ready to start our inbound turn. Descending toward 10,200 feet, where we'll capture our glide slope at that level. Okay, turn maybe a little bit too sharply into that one. We'll correct back out and capture it better. Probably should have been a little more decisive on it, but I'm just trying to ease into it so I don't have to go serpentine back and forth trying to line up on it. So that looks pretty good. Just gets a little bit closer to 10,200, and the glide slope indicator shows above us, which is where we want it to be as we get ready to capture it. And by capture it, I mean we're doing that manually. You may notice those big loops on the outside of my waypoints. I added those into the flight plan so I could get visualization of straight intersections at the waypoints. Otherwise, the Garmin rounds those turns way out to where it's hard to tell how closely I've aligned, especially on the shorter segments. Okay, drifted right a little bit here. Just need to get back on that as the glide slope gets to where we need to start descending. Hate to be doing two of those things at once. Okay, line back up, and I'm starting to creep down now on it. So on this descent at this speed, 120 knots, I'm going to want to be running between 600 to 700 feet per minute. So I'm trying to keep that vertical speed needle in the 600, 700 range, and and just watching that, watching the glide slope needle indicator at the same time as I'm trying to stay aligned on the localizer. I'm tweaking my trim as I'm doing this so that staying in this vertical speed, this descent range, requires less aggressive inputs. So while flying this final approach, I prairie dogged a couple of times on the way in while I turned my head away from the actual TV screen, so I couldn't see if the airport was actually visible at that altitude and distance yet, which it wasn't right there. And this is a really bad oversight. I just realized I hadn't set my altimeter pressure before takeoff, and that's a 200-foot difference in the hazardous direction. I had to reboot my flight a couple times and had the false memory in my head of setting it from the previous couple pre-flights. Anyway, that's critical for approach to minimums like this, of course. Okay, I wasn't actually looking during this pop-up, but approach lights are visible out there. This particular weather setting is rapidly variable depending on where the downdrafts are at any given moment. Okay, this time I'm going to have an actual look as I pop up out of my hole. And there it is. So I'm going to go visual the rest of the way here. And dropping flaps to full as we get aligned on the runway. Oh yeah, that is impressively obscured. We've got enough visibility to line up on it and get down to our landing. And we're down. Not my smoothest or favorite landing, but not a total mess either. I try to be careful at this point exiting the runway. This is where the sim likes to glitch and crash on me. I try not to glance my view around too much or too fast, and sometimes that helps keep the game ender at bay. And there we go, hand flying the EMB-110P in IMC through departure and approach using 3 VOR beacons and a localizer for navigation. I hope that was more instructional than horrifying, but let me know either way, especially if you've been challenging yourself with similar projects. So until next time, have fun flying.